Welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Pastor Rick Utzi from Maranatha in Plain City, Ohio. I want to talk to you about something I'm passionate about today, and that is biblical counseling, because I've had several conversations over the past few months with different people within the church about this very topic. And some are really in tune with it and think like I do about it, and others are a little more skeptical and wonder, like, what is this biblical counseling thing? Because there have been so many different things said about it. And part of it is the fault of the biblical counseling movement in that, they at the beginning thought, it was mainly about confronting sin and guiding people through the Word of God, and that's a very important piece. Some of it is the biblical counselors, some of them are just bad at what they do, and some of it is just a misrepresentation by people outside of the biblical counseling movement, characterizing it as, hey, it's just what I said at the beginning. Kind of like take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning, everything will be better, or take 2 Bible verses and believe it and have faith and everything will be better. It's more than that. Like, the Bible of biblical counseling is very critical and important. But there's another piece that's just as important as that. And I want to read out of 1 Thessalonians, because I think this verse captures the whole thing about how we care and counsel for one another very succinctly, and brings out 2 very important points. It's 1 Thessalonians, chapter 2, verse 8, but I want to read 7 and 8, because 7 kind of gives a background to it. It says, although, this is Paul speaking to the church, although we could have been a burden as Christ's disciples, or, we are important as apostles, and so we could have been more demanding of you, but instead of that, we were gentle among you, as a nurse nurtures her own children. And so he's basically just saying, you know what, we're kind of like on equal footing with you. We're not making ourselves out to be better than anyone or less than anyone. Like, we are caring for one another as we walk through life. And then it says in verse 8, we cared so much for you that we were pleased to share with you, now get this, not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you had become dear to us. So do you hear what Paul's saying? He's saying the gospel of God, the word of God, is so important. But he says, not only that, but we share with you our own lives. And that word for lives is our own souls, our own inner being. Like, we share everything with you. And so there's this idea, Paul saying, the Word of God is critical. And you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who believes more than I do the importance and power of the Word of God. But also, within the biblical counseling movement, there's this idea that we need to share our own lives. We need to not only be reconciling people to God and sharing the sin, but also recognize that we're also sufferers. We also need to be empathetic with people. We also need to give hope. We also need to ask the right questions and be in relationship with one another. And so there's this idea of both of those things happening in biblical counseling, which I think most people and a lot of people outside of it don't get or don't understand. And so Paul is just basically saying the counselor and the counselee are on equal footing. They're sharing their hearts and their lives together. They're in the Word of God, seeing what the Word of God has to say to one another. And that God made us to be people that are both relational and emotional, as well as rational and volitional, right? There's the thinking part, there's the decision-making part. All those things are important, but the relationships, the emotions that we have for each other, the love that we feel, the care that we have, all of this stuff goes together in making us whole and what God has called us to do. And I want to kind of finish with this verse from Paul also to the Corinthian church. And listen to how Paul describes himself, and then what he says gave him comfort. He says, in fact, when we came to Macedonia, we had no rest. Instead, we were troubled in every way. Conflict on the outside, fears within. Paul's basically saying, there were a lot of troubles. I was really concerned about you. I wondered how you thought about me. There were conflicts and circumstances that were coming our way that were causing internal distress and discomfort and conflict and fears within. And then he says in verse 6, but God, who comforts the downcast. So God's comforting the downcast. And listen to what he says. Comforted us by the arrival of Titus. Like he's saying, you know what? We had all these fears and struggles and conflicts going on within, but then Titus came. And we were comforted by him and his friendship and what he had to say about you. All of this brought comfort. So there was relationship there. There was this idea that God was using another person. God, the three in one, is relational. He created us relational. So here's the bottom line. Both the Word of God and the sharing of our souls together are critical, necessary, and important for counseling and for the care of one another. We need to one another each other. We need to really care about it. And just as we shouldn't remove the Word of God from counseling and care, neither should we remove the sharing of our souls together. Isn't that who Jesus was? Isn't that literally what he did while he was on this earth? And so I think all of us need to be working together to make the church we know more like the Jesus we say we believe in. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Bottom Line.